It feels like there's something going to be added to our funding agreements that feels a little bit punitive.
The executive director of London Cares says this week's council meeting was the first time she heard that a good neighbour clause might be added to future funding contracts. At this point, Chris Moss has more questions than answers about what the clause might require, but worries that if there are financial penalties, the consequences would ultimately hurt homeless Londoners.
If we lose funding, that loses programs, that reduces staffing, which reduces support on the streets.
On Tuesday, Council paused approval of a new procurement framework for housing stability services for 6 weeks so that staff could consider adding a good neighbour agreement. Already included by some other municipalities, it was one of the suggestions brought forward to a new task force by the Old East Village BIA.
The congregations, the loitering, the defecation in front of the social services, be more accountable to the operations that you have, just like a business would be.
We have staff that clean, we have maintenance, we have people who have peer programs where the people who run houses themselves help each other keep property clean. We do a lot. But the volume is too much. So right now in London, there's 2,279 people living on the street. We're all funded for like hundreds of people, not thousands of people.
The task force held its first meeting on December 4th. Led by the BIA, it included a couple members of City Council, representatives from emergency services, some healthcare professionals, but no frontline social service agencies.
I can understand the concern, but the first meeting was not the time to bring them to the table.
There was no one with lived experience at that table. There's no social services at that table. I think there's something missing from that solution.
Still in the early development stage, councillors will be working with city staff to draft a potential good neighbour clause for council consideration early in the new year.
We are failing the most vulnerable on the streets. We are failing those individuals. So why can't we all work together to come up with a solution, not only for the most vulnerable, but for also those that are the economic drivers and the people that live in our neighborhoods.
But we all have to be at the table to have those discussions and come up with things that are actually going to make change, not just punishment.
City staff will propose a good neighbour clause to a council committee at the end of January. Daryl Newcombe, CTV News.